We have a problem, Batman. Gotham needs you again.
Optimus Prime represents the most dangerous type of threat, the righteous leader who believes his cause justifies any action. His moral certainty operates like armor against doubt, making him nearly impossible to reason with when he's decided something is necessary for the greater good. The Autobot matrix of leadership isn't just a power source. It's a psychological anchor that reinforces his messianic complex, whispering that he's chosen, that his decisions carry divine weight. This makes him predictable in one sense and terrifying in another. He will always choose what he believes serves the greater good, even if it means sacrificing individuals, cities, or entire species. The contingency protocol must account for an opponent who genuinely believes he's saving the universe while potentially destroying it. His nobility isn't a weakness to exploit. It's a weapon he wields against anyone who questions his methods. Physical. Neutralization requires understanding that Optimus Prime isn't just a giant robot. He's a walking weapons platform with millions of years of combat experience. Direct confrontation is suicide unless you can exploit his psychological blind spots. His transformation ability makes him tactically versatile, but it also creates vulnerability windows during the conversion process. The key is forcing rapid transformations through environmental manipulation, obstacles that require vehicle mode, combat situations that demand robot form, terrain that makes either mode disadvantageous. His trailer contains his most powerful weapons and can be separated from his cab, creating a tactical weakness if you can cut the connection. EMP weapons are temporary solutions at best. His systems adapt quickly to electronic warfare. The real vulnerability lies in his energon dependency and the fact that his size makes stealth impossible. Guerrilla tactics, hit-and-run strikes targeting his supply lines, forcing him into prolonged conflicts that drain his energy reserves. These are the only viable approaches for direct engagement. The psychological profile reveals a leader carrying the weight of his entire species' survival, which creates exploitable stress fractures in his decision-making process. Optimus Prime suffers from what I call Atlas syndrome, the belief that only he can bear the responsibility for everyone's welfare. This manifests as reluctance to fully trust others with critical decisions, tendency to take on impossible missions alone, and most critically, the inability to accept that some battles cannot be won without unacceptable losses. His greatest fear isn't death. It's failure that results in the extinction of the Autobots or innocent lives lost under his protection. Manipulation tactics focus on creating scenarios where any decision he makes results in casualties he's sworn to protect. Present him with two disasters happening simultaneously. Force him to choose between saving Autobot lives and human lives. Create situations where his moral code conflicts with tactical necessity. The goal isn't to break him mentally. It's to paralyze his decision-making long enough to neutralize the immediate threat. Leadership neutralization requires understanding that Optimus Prime's greatest strength is also his critical vulnerability, the absolute loyalty he inspires in his followers. The Autobots don't just follow him, they worship him as a combination of military commander, moral guide, and religious figure. This creates a command structure that's both incredibly strong and dangerously fragile. Remove Optimus Prime from the equation, and the Autobots lose not just their leader, but their spiritual center. However, the reverse is also true. Turn his followers against him, and you destroy his effectiveness without firing a shot. The strategy involves exposing the contradictions between his stated values and his wartime actions, highlighting the casualties that result from his decisions, creating doubt about whether his leadership has actually saved or doomed the Autobots. This requires careful intelligence work, finding former Autobots who've been disillusioned by his methods, broadcasting evidence of his failures to the rank and file. The goal is forcing a leadership crisis within the Autobot ranks that neutralizes their effectiveness as a unified force. Resource interdiction represents the most practical approach to long-term containment. Optimus Prime and the Autobots require specific resources to maintain their operations: energon for fuel, raw materials for repairs, technology for weapons and equipment. Unlike biological opponents, They can't adapt to use alternative resources. They're dependent on specific materials and energy sources that can be controlled or contaminated. The strategy involves identifying their supply chains, locating energon deposits, and either securing them for our own use or rendering them unusable. This includes corrupting their technological infrastructure, introducing viruses into their computer systems, sabotaging their manufacturing capabilities. The beauty of this approach is that it forces them into increasingly desperate situations where their moral code conflicts with their survival needs. When the Autobots are starving for energon, Prime must choose between maintaining his ethical standards and keeping his people alive. These are the moments when even the most righteous leaders make compromises that can be exploited. Communication warfare exploits the fact that the Autobots' greatest strength, their unity and coordination, depends entirely on their ability to communicate with each other. Optimus Prime commands through a combination of direct orders and inspirational leadership that requires constant contact with his troops, jamming their communications, intercepting their transmissions, feeding false information into their networks. These tactics fragment their coordination and force them to operate as isolated units rather than a unified army. More sophisticated approaches involve mimicking Prime's communication patterns, issuing contradictory orders that create confusion in the ranks, or broadcasting false intelligence that leads them into traps. The psychological impact of communication breakdown is as important as the tactical advantage. Autobots who can't reach their leader begin to doubt whether he's still alive, whether their mission has changed, whether they're fighting for a cause that still exists. This doubt is the crack in their armor that allows other strategies to take hold. What do you think, Alfred?
Master Bruce, I fear you're approaching this as if Optimus Prime were merely another threat to be neutralized, but he represents something far more complex. He's not just a powerful robot, he's a symbol of hope for an entire species facing extinction, a leader who has chosen to protect humanity despite having every reason to view us as primitive and potentially dangerous. Your contingency planning, while tactically sound, risks overlooking the fundamental question: what circumstances would actually require neutralizing someone whose core programming is to protect innocent life? Yes, his righteousness could become fanaticism, his leadership could become tyranny, but these are possibilities, not certainties. Perhaps the most important contingency is not how to defeat him, but how to communicate with him if he ever loses his way. Sometimes the most strategic approach is ensuring you never have to use these protocols at all.
Your perspective forces me to examine the deeper implications of contingency planning against allies. The protocols I've outlined assume corruption or compromise of Prime's moral core, scenarios where the protector becomes the threat. But his point about communication resonates with tactical reality. Optimus Prime's greatest weakness isn't his righteousness, it's his isolation from meaningful peer relationships. He carries the burden of leadership alone, making decisions that affect millions without anyone qualified to challenge his judgment. The most effective long-term strategy isn't preparing to fight him. It's ensuring he has advisors who can reach him when his moral certainty begins to override his tactical wisdom. This requires identifying potential Autobot leaders who share his values but aren't blinded by hero worship, cultivating relationships with humans he trusts enough to accept, counsel from creating communication channels that remain open even during crisis situations. The contingency becomes less about neutralization and more about intervention, having the infrastructure in place to reach him before he crosses lines that would require more aggressive responses. Technological countermeasures must account for the possibility that Optimus Prime's systems could be compromised or corrupted by external forces. The matrix of leadership connects him to the collective knowledge and wisdom of previous Autobot leaders, but it also represents a potential vector for manipulation by sufficiently advanced technology or entities. Scenarios involving mental programming, viral contamination of his core systems, or outside control of his decision-making processes require specialized responses. The contingency includes development of technology capable of severing his connection to the Matrix temporarily, methods for detecting unauthorized alterations to his programming, and protocols for communicating with him when his responses don't match his established behavioral patterns. This represents perhaps the most dangerous scenario. A compromised Optimus Prime would retain all his capabilities while operating under hostile control, making him a weapon of unimaginable destructive potential. The countermeasures must be deployable quickly, reliably, and without requiring his cooperation or awareness. Environmental manipulation offers the most subtle approach to containing or redirecting Optimus Prime's actions. His moral code compels him to prioritize civilian safety above all other considerations, a programming imperative that can be used to influence his tactical decisions. The strategy involves creating situations where his presence in certain areas would endanger innocent lives, forcing him to withdraw from strategic positions or abandon planned operations. This includes controlled evacuation of civilian populations from areas where his involvement is unwanted, strategic placement of vulnerable targets that would be endangered by large-scale combat, and manipulation of media coverage to highlight the collateral damage that results from his operations. The goal isn't to make him abandon his mission. It's to channel his efforts into areas where they're less problematic or more easily monitored. This approach exploits his greatest strength as a method of tactical control, using his own moral code as a guidance system for his actions. The final protocol acknowledges a fundamental truth about threats of this magnitude. Sometimes the best strategy is ensuring the problem never arises. Optimus Prime's greatest danger lies not in his current form, but in what he might become under extreme circumstances. The loss of his people, the corruption of his ideals, the weight of impossible choices finally breaking his moral foundation. The contingency planning includes monitoring systems for detecting these warning signs, intervention protocols for supporting him through crisis periods, and backup plans for containing the damage if prevention fails. This requires understanding that neutralizing Optimus Prime isn't just about stopping a single threat. It's about preventing the collapse of Autobot civilization and the potential emergence of a much darker alternative. Because in the end, the greatest contingency isn't the plan to defeat him. It's the plan to ensure he never needs defeating, that the Protector never becomes the destroyer, that hope never transforms into the very thing it was meant to oppose. When gods walk among mortals, the most dangerous weapon isn't the one that can kill them. It's the wisdom to know when that weapon should never be drawn.